Hello, good afternoon. Boris Johnson is to meet the German Chancellor and the French President in the coming days to make the case for a new Brexit deal. The visits to Angela Merkel on Wednesday and Emmanuel Macron on Thursday are the first Mr Johnson has made since he became Prime Minister. Leaked government documents have warned of major disruption in the event of a no-deal Brexit, including shortages of food, fuel and medicine. Well, the Minister in charge of preparations, Michael Gove, has denied the leak, tweeting today that Operation Yellowhammer is a worst-case scenario, and the government has taken very significant steps in the most recent 3 weeks since Boris Johnson became Prime Minister to accelerate Brexit planning. Our political correspondent Mark LaBelle reports.
Boris Johnson has been getting his message out on law and order, the NHS and no-deal preparations. This week he'll enter the international stage, meeting Europe's top two power brokers, but without a deal in sight. He wants them to know Parliament won't stop Brexit, and this weekend again warned MPs from doing that, writing, "The so-called efforts to prevent no deal are in fact making no deal more likely." But today's Sunday Times leak of classified government documents showing their contingency plans for a no deal make for painful reading. A risk the country should not be taking, according to a former head of the civil service who now advises Labour and has called for a second Brexit referendum.
Part of serving the government of the day is to give them honest advice of the risks. In my personal view, these risks are completely insane for this country to be taking.
In the Cabinet Office document written in the past month, it shows plans to avoid a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland are unlikely to prove sustainable. And it predicts freight disruption at ports caused by customs checks that could impact the supply of fresh food and some medicines. One Brexiteer this morning was keen to play down its significance.
I think there's a lot of scaremongering around, and a lot of people are playing into Project Fear and all the rest of it. We've got to prepare for no deal. In fact, the previous Prime Minister created DEXU, and she said that the mandate of DEXU last summer, was to prepare for no deal.
To avoid a no-deal Brexit, Labour pledge a vote of no confidence when MPs return in a fortnight, which could usher in a Jeremy Corbyn-led unity government.
He is absolutely doing the right thing to avert this no-deal Brexit that we have said in our manifesto, that we have said time and time again in the House of Commons, that other political parties have committed to. The only way to do that is to get behind Jeremy Corbyn.
That such bitter political divisions exist will only make Boris Johnson's task in Europe more difficult.
Our correspondent Mark LaBelle reporting the Labour MP Stephen Doughty is one of more than 100 MPs to write a letter to the Prime Minister demanding Parliament is recalled. Why have you written the letter?
Well, because we face a national emergency. We have a reckless Prime Minister who's trying to drag us into an undemocratic no-deal Brexit and his unelected advisor running the show. And Parliament is not sitting. We're not able to hold the government to account. Billions of pounds of taxpayers' money are being poured down the drain on no-deal preparations. And across the House, across the parties, we're not going to stand for that, and we want to hold him to account.
I suppose there might be a bit of scepticism about this desire to hold the government to account and to do something. When Parliament was sitting for most of the months after Theresa May agreed her deal with the European Union, it couldn't pass the deal, nor could it find a consensus on any alternative.
Well, indeed, that's why we need the time. That's why we should all be there. That's why we should all be engaging in the discussions necessary to find a way forward through this, whichever way people voted. And indeed, we have people who signed this letter who come from all different perspectives on how to deal with the Brexit crisis. But the fact is we're not, and the government is taking, as I said, reckless decisions. There is no democratic mandate for a no deal, and we are the elected representatives of the people, elected in 2017, and we should be able to put the people in our constituencies' views to the Prime Minister.
I suppose you can understand from the government's point of view why they might see other motives in this letter, because, as you say, you don't want a no-deal Brexit. The government says it's not their preferred choice, but if the EU won't negotiate with them, then it may come down to that. And if their suspicion would be, if Parliament were recalled, it would simply be used as an opportunity to try and wrestle control away from the government, which, after all, is the government.
Well, of course, it was all about taking back control. And Parliament, which is at the centre of our democracy, has been for thousands of years. That is the centre, that's the crucible of our democracy. We should be there. We should be able to hold the government to account. We should should be able to pass laws, we should be able to question ministers. At the moment we can't do that, and we're only going to go back for a couple of weeks and then go on another recess for 3 weeks. I think most people in the country, whatever their views on Brexit, will find that an extraordinary situation. It's not tenable, and particularly not given some of the extraordinary comments and decisions that have been taken.
Why didn't you send this letter in July then, before you all rose for the summer break?
Well, many MPs did express serious concerns, and a number of MPs actually voted against the recess for the summer. I think people hoped for a different approach from the government. I thought they thought he was going to engage in serious negotiations. He hasn't, and instead he's taken this reckless approach driven by the unelected Dominic Cummings.
Let me look at the newspaper story we saw today in the Sunday Times, the Operation Yellowhammer story. The newspaper suggested this was the kind of realistic planning for what may happen on the 31st of October if we don't have a deal. Michael Gove, the Cabinet Office Minister, who after was in charge of this now and has been put in charge by Boris Johnson, says, look, these are outdated and worst case scenarios. We've done the preparations. It isn't going to be like this. People need to stop worrying.
Well, I think that's deeply disappointing because the fact is that these are very serious documents. They talk not only about the economic damage that will be done, but also the damage to peace and stability. For example, if there's a hard border on the island of Ireland, and of course to our security. If we leave without a security treaty, if we leave without agreements, that's going to make it easier for criminals, for terrorists, for those who wish our country ill, to be able to do what they want to do. And I think that's an extraordinary situation to be contemplating as a government. But the fact is they're putting ideology first. Dominic Cummings said just 2 weeks before he became Chief Advisor to the Prime Minister that, if necessary, ideas have to be rammed down people's throats practically at gunpoint. Now, that is an extraordinary comment to make from the Prime Minister's Chief Advisor, who is unelected, not least after the death of our colleague Jo Cox in 2016. It's offensive, and I think it shows that he is willing to put anything above the national interest.
Assuming the government doesn't respond to this letter in the way you would hope, and you have to wait until the beginning of September, do you believe it will still be possible to act to intervene on this and perhaps force the government to ask for an extension of the Brexit negotiating period? Absolutely.
I mean, the fact is, let's look at the government situation. They have a majority of one. The government's support level in Parliament since 2017 has gone down, not up. The Prime Minister has seen for himself the level of disquiet on his own benches, indeed from many former ministers who themselves saw the reckless consequences of a potential no deal and were not willing to tolerate that anymore. And the fact is we have a group of people now who are willing to put everything, their ideology, their obsessions, their personal interests above the national interest. And that is not a situation that can be allowed to continue. And I'm confident that the representatives of the British people, Parliament, will hold that government to account and stop them doing this.
Stephen Doughty, MP for Cardiff South and Penarth, thanks very much for coming in.